Hello, Refia.
Hello.
Thank you very much for speaking with me.
You're welcome.
And I would like to start with how you got into the technique, what you were doing at the time.
Yeah, this is the kind of difficult one for me because it's not easy like most people. It was kind of long and complicated. So, most people just go and they have some lessons and they feel better and they carry on. And for me, it was a much longer journey and I didn't feel better. I felt worse. And so it's not a good story if you see what I mean.
I'm interested in the authentic story, in your stories. Yes. It's really about getting to know you and how you experienced it. So maybe you can tell me when you first heard about it.
It was in the 1970s. I was having some acupuncture. I was in a bit of a mess, to say the least. And the wife of the acupuncturist was training with Mr. McDonald, and she told me about it and said, come along and be a body. And that was my first experience. I went a few times. I could clearly see the difference between McDonald's hands and his students. And something sort of just lodged in me that said, one day I might do something with this. It's a good thing. Some years went by, and one day I got a phone call from a friend to say, there are a couple of Alexander teachers who come into our house every Sunday just to work with people. Would you like to come? So I jumped at that chance. And basically there were two lovely French teachers who had trained with Walter Carrington, and they just went round and gave us turns. And so I started actually having some lessons with them. Twice a week I went to Barnes, which was quite a long drive for me at that time.
And who was your first teacher? Yeah, or these two French guys?
Dominique and Alain Jacques. Mostly I saw Alain because they had a small child and Dominique was looking after the child.
And so you got into the technique because you had some physical issues?
No, in a funny way, no. Because I just felt it was a good thing. I had a lot of problems and a lot of pain, and at that time I didn't know I had a scoliosis and that all the pain was coming from that. And I was seeing a cranial osteopath who was very helpful, but not helpful enough. And I tried innumerable alternative therapies as well as going to see doctors and so on, and nobody knew what it was. Nothing helped. The acupuncturist helped briefly and then it all came back again. And so I no longer believed that anything was going to help me. So I didn't actually go into the Alexander technique to get better.
What was the motivation?
I can't really say. It was just clear that it was something good, and that I guess I'd been searching for something to do myself for some time, and I'd been doing some healing and some massage, but nothing really clicked. And so there was something about this that clicked.
Yeah, interesting. So you had lessons with
I had
Dominique
lessons, yes, and then they moved back to France. And also at that time I was pregnant, and then I had baby, and I was hoping that Dominique would be with me, but they'd already moved back. And so I didn't have any lessons for a while. Then I went to see Mary Holland, and I had a few lessons with her. And then I was being a single mum at the time, and by the time my daughter was about 2, I heard about this new training course that was quite near here, and I rang up to find out about it, and they just said, come and visit.
Mm-hmm. And whose training course
And that was Dan Burton, and the person I spoke to was Isabel McGilvray, and there was also Sue Tame. So there were 3 heads of training.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to visit, and it suddenly felt like I'd landed at home.
Mm.
And this was already quite a few years after my first experience. And so I managed to arrange childcare for 3 weeks, and I went along to this training course for 3 weeks, and by the end of it I knew I was going to be staying for 3 years.
Mm. So you found your training home.
Yes, and so I really went into it to learn to be a teacher and not to get better.
Yeah.
Which is kind of different from most people, I think.
There's so many ways into the technique.
Yeah, there are. Mm-hmm.
And that's the interesting thing about these conversations for me, that everybody has such a different story and just different paths into the technique.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about your experiences during the training?
They're not good ones, because I was in a hell of a lot of pain most of the time. Every time something changed, it would trigger, and yeah, so it was a brilliant training, but it was really, really tough.
Mm. Because of the physical changes that happened through the training that triggered pain. Yeah, I can imagine. That's not easy.
But I still knew it was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Mm. And then you graduated. Around what time was that?
In December 1982.
Mm. And then you started teaching immediately?
I did. I was quite lucky because I originally come from South Africa, and I went to visit my family there, and I'd been given some contacts there, got in touch with them, and within a matter of 3 weeks, I had a full-time practice there.
In South Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was extraordinary, and I had people begging us to run workshops, and they just opened their beautiful homes and got people together, and it was an incredible experience of first teaching. Quite a different story when I got back here. It took more like 3 years to build up a practice. And it wasn't long after I qualified that the Channel 4 program came out on the Alexander technique, and that really changed our lives.
Was that the back pain study?
No, it was well before that.
Mm-hmm.
It was called A Way of Being, and it was very positive for the Alexander technique. And so as it had been on the telly, people got to know about it.
Great.
And we had some golden years where people just came for lessons for their own health and well-being, until we had some financial crashes, and then only the desperate people started to come.
Yeah.
That was in the 80s, yeah.
That was in the 80s. Yeah. And you are not only an Alexander teacher, you are also an artist.
Yes.
And a silversmith.
Yes.
And I can see your beautiful earrings.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've had a few different trainings. I was first an art historian, and then I studied silversmithing. And when I was doing a postgraduate training in silversmithing, I got pregnant with my daughter, and that's when I got into Alexander, and I didn't complete my course, but it was a postgrad one anyway. Much later in life, I studied stained glass. Yeah.
Okay, and how was the balance between all of your arts and the Alexander technique?
It weighed in one direction and the other from time to time over the years. They went alongside each other, and I always taught silversmithing and jewelry making, while I was teaching Alexander. But I wasn't very good at promoting myself in the arts, and couldn't really earn a living with it. So
applies to many artists.
But I could earn a living with the Alexander technique.
And how would you say did the arts influence the Alexander technique, or the Alexander technique influence the arts? Was it a kind of fruitful relationship?
I think in terms of the arts, I needed the Alexander technique because it's so easy to misuse yourself really badly when you're doing tiny little things. Well, small. Some of it was small and some of it was, big and hammering and that kind of thing. So yes, it was very necessary for that.
Yeah.
I don't know how the influence went the other way.
Well, you think like an artist, I guess. I think there are parallels between.
Yes. It's always so much easier to see how Alexander and music go together, and musicians and how they need it and so on. But it's not so easy to see with the other, with the visual arts.
Yeah, that's true. And still, there are so many artists in the Alexander world, not only musicians.
Yes.
And how did the school happen?
Well, Robin Simmons was running a school in Hampstead, and he was wanting to move to Switzerland. So a year before the move, he was looking for someone to take over his school. And I was in the line of fire, and somehow it fell to me. And so I went to teach at that school for about a year before. In a sense, I took it over, and in a sense, I built it myself, because I knew immediately that I would do it differently, and that I wouldn't stay in the same place, that I had the space here at LCATT. I really had very few students that came straight from him, two of whom qualified almost immediately after about a term, and another one after another 2 terms. So then it was a question of building up myself. But it was a difficult patch in my life, and starting the training course was the one thing that fell into place really beautifully. So it was really meant to be.
So you were living already in this house?
Yes. And I was already teaching in this room.
And you have these beautiful large rooms, which is of course
very lucky.
Perfect. Yeah. So you said it fell beautifully in place. So you immediately got some students, and
slowly, I would say, not that quickly, but slowly we built up. And we went from strength to strength, actually. It was very nice to see the way it all flourished.
And did you start on your own?
Yes. I started on my own. I asked Roger and Judith to be my assistants. Judith turned me down because she was too busy. But she came on board fairly soon after. They came to teach here immediately. Judith was 1 day a week then, and Roger came for 2, I think. And so we began to gel as a team, and they were my assistants for 20 years.
Yeah. So running a school is, of course, a very different matter than teaching individual students.
Yes.
How was the experience with that, especially in the beginning?
Very rewarding, because it is so amazing working with students who are really committed and working on themselves and growing and changing, and it's fabulous. That's not to say that some pupils don't do that, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and you have to handle a whole group.
Yes,
which is different.
I felt I needed eyes in the back of my head the whole time. Yeah.
So, but you loved working in the group, and so that worked out.
Yes, I'd run lots of groups and residential courses previously, so
Okay.
I was comfortable with a group. Yes. Also comfortable with individual work. So
yeah. So could you describe the structure, how you built it up and how it maybe changed over time?
I think what the students who came to me were used to were just getting lots of turns, and then a little bit of theoretical stuff, reading the books and some anatomy. And I built into it a lot more to do with hands-on, how to learn to put hands-on, and that's become very much my speciality, is teaching hands-on. So really in depth with that. So we started doing individual sessions teaching hands-on and groups teaching hands-on. And that's been a very integral part of the training. We generally started people putting hands-on towards the end of the second term. What else was different? They still got their turns every day. And obviously work on the self was primary. And then I also put some focus on learning to run groups. So we always had doing talks and talk-throughs, like a lying down talk-through or a guided activity procedure or something like that.
And I think you always had a lot of musicians.
Yes, well, that's thanks to Judith and her contact with the Royal College of Music. Although not all our musicians have come through the Royal College.
But also other people.
Yes, definitely other people. From mathematicians to lawyers to to firemen.
Firemen.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a task and an achievement to run a school for so long, as times are not easy, especially at the moment.
Yes, well,
many schools are struggling.
Yeah, well, I think what we're suffering from more than anything else is Brexit.
Yes.
Yes. And we have students struggling to get visas, and we can't offer them.
Yeah.
Obviously, the pandemic had some effect, but we did actually have someone who started online. And she's a wonderful teacher now.
I started online as well.
Did you? Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was interesting to see how much we could actually achieve online. But it was a huge relief when we could get back to putting hands on again.
Yes, yes. And so you also shared that with Judith and Roger?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we stuck to our same days. I was doing 4 days a week and they were each doing 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And then more recently, I asked them if they would like to be co-heads of training, and happily they accepted. And I managed to shed chunks of admin, which has been absolutely wonderful. And I've been also managed to go away for longer periods of time.
Yeah. Oh,
which is
fantastic.
good for my health.
Yeah, of course. In terms of your way of teaching, what would you say were your main influences? Or how did it develop? How did it change over time?
Well, I think when I qualified, I had this ideal that I was going to be the most non-doing teacher in the whole wide world. And, and then I got all these new people and it wasn't so easy. So, and I don't know how things have changed and developed, but I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
But I have to say that the pain didn't just go away when I finished training.
Yeah.
I have had long years of pain from, the same stuff that I had before. But the spaces between got bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And so slowly it's, it became a much more manageable thing.
That's interesting. I have a similar experience with my headaches. I came because of that, and I also had tried all sorts of things before. And Alexander really did help a lot. It is quite life-changing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely life-changing. I dread to think what I would have been like if I hadn't had the Alexander technique. Really unbearable to think about.
And how do you see the work with, well, obviously it's holistic, with the emotional side of things?
I think the emotional side of things are unavoidably part of it. It is truly psychophysical.
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's important to me that the work flourishes and that it gets passed on and that we all grow and develop and it spreads through the world. And it's not looking good at the moment.
Yeah. Can I ask you to give me a few very brief definitions? Like, how do you explain the Alexander technique to someone who has never heard of it?
I think in all the 40-odd years I've been teaching, I found that difficult.
Yes.
And it really depends on who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
I've got a bit lazy at times and said, well, Google it. But in the early days, there was no Google.
Yeah, and you find a lot of strange things.
Yes, my best experience was going to a party where two people who didn't know each other found out that I was an Alexander teacher. And so they started to explain to each other what it was, and I didn't have to say a word.
That's good. And what would you say is for you personally the most important aspect of the technique?
Well, it's going to sound very boring, but inhibition.
And how do you understand inhibition?
I like the definition that Frank Pierce Jones gave. It's a little old-fashioned and lots of people don't like it, but it's withholding consent from an habitual response to a stimulus. And that kind of summarizes it for me. It could probably have better language nowadays, but personally that suits me. I mean, I think one of the things to put in about the training course is really honoring each person's personal journey within the training.
Yes, very important.
And I think I should have said that.
You can still take it in.
Okay. We've tended to get quite a lot of sensitive people because I think I'm quite sensitive, and I guess I sort of understand it.
Yeah.
But it isn't always easy to have on the training course. It's challenging, but worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one aspect. A lot of sensitives come into the technique, a lot of artists, a lot of people who are interested in...
And wounded healers.
Wounded healers, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's also beautiful.
Yeah.
And the community aspect of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I found that very important in my training.
Yeah, mine was a bit mad, but by the time I qualified, there were 50 people on my training course.
Oh my goodness.
So it was quite tough.
Wow. How many teachers?
Innumerable.
Okay.
But not always new. I mean, not always experienced teachers. Don had, was committed to taking on the teachers, the people that he qualified to teach at the school to get the experience. And I was lucky enough to be able to do that.
After
when I got back from South Africa. And so I taught on ATA training course for quite some years after that, even after Don left, and Lizzie Atkinson and Adam Knott were heads of training.
And you probably also have a lot of visiting teachers here.
We have had a lot in the past, and we've been very lucky with that. And we've also been when Elizabeth Walker was alive, we used to take the whole school to visit her in Oxford for a day, and that was very special.
Oh, nice.
And we also did quite a lot of exchanges with other schools. When Ilana Machova was running her school, we would do, one term she would come to us and one term we'd go to them. And that was very fruitful. It was lovely. Also building community.
Yeah. Did you also do intensives somewhere else, workshops, exchanges with other schools in different places?
Not once the school had started. I think we were pretty London based. Most people were working after, a school morning or afternoon, and so it was difficult to organize a residential thing. We did do one exchange. Well, it wasn't really an exchange. The school in Vienna came to visit us here. And we all put them up, and some of them slept on the floor here, and it was wonderful.
Well, that's how to teach groups is quite a skill. And so you said you were introducing that in the training?
Definitely. I don't think I didn't really have a clue when I first qualified, but I was thrown into it because, as I said, these people were opening their homes and bringing people, and you just got on with it. But I do remember the first workshop that I ran for an hour. I must have spent 3 weeks preparing it. So it was just something that I worked on and that grew. Yeah.
So how do you structure them when you can't put hands on everybody?
Well, we did give everybody 2 lessons during that time, as well as running a morning group and then a late afternoon group and then some activity in the evening.
Okay.
I think you learn more quickly about the principles of the Alexander technique with groups than you necessarily do with individual lessons. So it's actually good to have both, because you get the individual work more intensely with individual lessons. So I think both are good. But in the beginning, we ran groups out of necessity, because how else were we going to, get people to come? In those days, you stuck little notices on notice boards in health food shops and so on, and I put ads in Time Out and things like that.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that might be it. But I think that's much more important to talk about the school than to talk about my individual, pathway there, because
I think it is important because, well, that's the starting point of the series. Alexander teachers are very much like artists in the sense that their work is very much informed by their life experience.
Yeah.
And that's why the life stories are important to me, to understand how people got to where they are and how they developed their technique and how both influenced each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Refia.
You're welcome. Yes. We'll see how many times I pulled my head back during that.